So that oil running down there and onto the exhaust manifold is actually coming from the solenoid, and it's just escaping through that gap underneath the valve covers, and it sort of makes it look like the valve cover is leaking, but it's not. It's that solenoid. Also, that solenoid is also leaking. I'm looking for any oil inside them. This one's starting to. This one's definitely got oil inside. And that one will also leak down there. This is where the puddle of oil was. If you can see it from here. There. Under the intake manifold. This can be caused by oil running down from these solenoids and just puddling, gathering underneath the intake manifold. Or there's a breather underneath the intake manifold, underneath the fuel rail, that can also leak. I would start with these 1, 2, 3, and 4 solenoids first. If the oil still puddles, then you're left with the breather. The breather is a very big job. You have to remove everything to the block. These 4, the inner 2 solenoids will account for oil under the intake manifold as well as the breather, and the outer 2 solenoids will account for oil dripping onto the exhaust manifold and burning, and that's what you're smelling in the cabin. This oil filter housing can also leak. I don't see it leaking right now. Usually when that happens, oil drips right on the transmission. Looks like we do have some residue on the transmission. It's basically just a gasket that becomes flat over time because it's bolted. It's a piece of plastic bolted to the block with a rubber gasket in between. If we end up doing the breather, then since everything comes out, it would make sense to replace the oil filter gasket seal as well. But as of right now, I would just start with the 1, 2, 3, and 4 solenoids. I'll give you a shot at the bottom of the car as well. After the cleanup. So the pan stayed clean, the transmission stayed clean. All these bits and pieces that were just covered in oil, all these stayed clean, which makes me think that the leak was indeed coming from the top of the engine and not, anything on the bottom. I've tightened those clamps for the power steering return line, and that seemed to have stopped leaking. There's a shot of the cam position sensor that has an O-ring and can also leak, but you can see it's dry. So that's not it. And the same thing on this side. This side is really hard to get to, but it looks exactly the same. The vacuum pump looks dry up there. Let's see. I can't really see anything else from down here, but just giving you an overall picture of what the bottom of the car looks like now. So there it is. Now, granted, the belly pan's still going to be messy and soaked with oil, but that's okay. That's no big deal. So I would start with the 4 solenoids and see what happens.